an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Son of a Trickster, chapters 26 through 33. In these chapters, where to start? River otters. Did not see that coming. This sequence was so creepy that when Owen finally came to bed, I insisted on reading it out loud to him because I needed somebody else to experience the absolute unsettling nature of this scene. And you know what? He did experience it. And he requested that I not read him anything like this again right before we went to bed. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So yeah, I am not kidding, guys. I was like reading this in bed, and Owen was taking care of some stuff and then going to the bathroom to brush his teeth and all of this. Then he comes to bed, and I'm like, can I please read this to you? Because seriously. He was like, okay. And as I was reading, he was just like, I don't like this. Why are you doing this to me right now? I was like, sorry. Yeah, this was like a combination of, there were so many emotions going on because like I got really creeped out at one point and mentioned to him before this section that I read to him, I mentioned to him how creeped out I was. And then 10 minutes or so later, he looked over and there were tears running down my face because of what goes on with Mrs. Jax. And he was like, what is even going on over there? And I was just like, there's so much happening, and this is really sad. So I was on a bit of a roller coaster. Okay. Let's start off with chapter 26, in which his mother is on some other shit. I don't know what this is, but I feel like it's meth. Based on the fact, I'm going to read this thing because he gets home. The place is sparkling clean from the basement up. Like everything is just so, it has been scrubbed within an inch of its life. Reeks of bleach and soap. And when he gets upstairs, his mother is busy plucking her eyebrows and also plucking out hairs from her face that he can't seem to see. And when he tries to stop her, she says, "It's itchy. My hair is itchy. I can feel things crawling in the roots. Mom, I don't think there's anything there. What are you on? What did you take?" "It's all good," she said. He reached to take the tweezers from her and she stabbed at his hand. He whipped his hand back and she went back to plucking, ignoring him as she focused on her face. The back of his hand had scratches where she'd gotten him, tiny parallel lines of blood. Jared sat with her until he couldn't watch anymore, and then he went out, walked with no destination in mind. He stopped at a bench and listened to the birds, to the traffic, to the blood coursing through his body and his own heartbeat loud in his ears. So that feeling of things crawling on you is apparently like pretty common with meth. And I don't know how many of you are like familiar, but a lot of times meth addicts will have like lesions on their skin, and that is because of scratching when they think they feel things crawling on them, and they'll scratch so hard that they break the skin, and then an infection begins, and their immune system is so run down because of the drug that it is not able to fight off the infection very well. So they will have a bunch of little infections all over them. And the teeth too, you know, people talk about meth mouth, and I had always wondered about that. Like, we don't see that here with his mom, but apparently if you use a lot of meth, it makes your saliva really acidic, so it wears through the enamel on your teeth and makes your teeth way, way more susceptible to infection. So basically, meth is just a recipe for your body to eat itself. And it's the worst. And his mother has such an acute, she calls it a hangover. It's not, it's a detox. Like, the reaction to all of this is so intense that Jared realizes later that his mother didn't leave the house because she was angry at him. She left and went off on a bender and completely forgot that he even existed. And there's, a kind of a like, what's worse sort of thing going on there. But I think for him, if she was angry, he could deal with that better. But the idea that she just like forgot about him, that he was a complete non-factor, I think that really like is worse in his mind. I'd have to agree. It's one thing for somebody to be angry at you because you feel like that is an engaged sort of active them thinking about you and having a reaction to things that you did. But if they just forgot about you, got stuff all over my sleeve here. If they just forgot about you, that's so much more hurtful. Like, it just, and this leads to this whole thing, which we'll get into, but he is really excited to go and live with his grandmother. And then by the end of this section, he feels bad about that and doesn't want to go because things start to improve. And he is aware that things can change on a dime. So maybe by the time summer rolls around, things will have gotten worse again. And he'll be glad to go and he'll be glad to have this set up. But as of right now, everything was so bad with his mother that he would leave right now if he could get the chance. He just feels a lot of pressure to finish the 10th grade. Which, again, I respect, but also, like, do it somewhere else. Just get out of there, dude. So, I'm interested to see what happens, because his Nana is the person that he calls at the end of this chapter, and she reacts in a way that indicates she knows exactly what the fuck he's talking about, which I would not be surprised if that leads to her swooping in and, like, taking him away. Which I don't know what his mother would do, but I feel like that'd be pretty bad. So, all right, let's go to chapter 27. This is when we really get the indicator, more than we have anywhere else, that his inner voice is actually somebody else. There's an argument to be made that maybe it's a duality thing. And there are a couple of different beings in him, especially if he's like a shapeshifter or something. If he has more than one facet, this could be a facet of him. But there's something that feels to me like he's got a connection to somebody else. So he's sitting in French class, and he all of a sudden feels like he needs to eat some pizza. Like he's really into the idea of having pizza for lunch. And yet, he doesn't really want pizza. And he doesn't really want to go to Pizzarama to get pizza. He just wants to go home. But it doesn't seem like this voice is giving him a choice. And there's a certain feeling of like him trying to resist the urge to walk over there, the urge to like get up and leave, various things throughout this whole scene that almost makes it feel like somebody has taken him over for a second, which is a really disconcerting thought. And if it is a duality thing, I feel like I'd be much more comfortable with that, because that's just another part of himself that's trying to push him in a certain direction. And that feels a lot less violating to me than than somebody who is sort of like invading his mind and forcing him to do things, which is what it feels like he thinks is happening. And I can understand why. From my perspective, it also looks like that's what's happening. So go on, treat yourself, which was a weird thing to think. He didn't have any money. He'd tanked his savings paying off their hydro. He didn't want to ask Mrs. Brantford to front him the pot with a promise to pay her back. He didn't think that was going to fly. So he was trying to figure out who he could borrow money off, or what he could sell, or what job he could get, and pizza was the last thing he wanted. Trust the universe. Trust that everything is going to work out. He left school, and his feet took him to the Pizzarama like they were walking on their own. Jared wanted to go home, but he didn't. He saw the burgundy Cadillac before he saw the little old native lady with the monster hiding beneath her skin. She perched on a stool, smiling and giving him a wave through the front window like dream communication was normal and what they were doing wasn't insane. "Hello, Jared," she said. "What a pleasant surprise." The monster underneath her skin snarled. This is super confusing to me. Because when Jared met this lady on the road, when she was trying to pick him up, the reaction that he had and the inner voice reaction were totally different. Here, it feels like the inner voice is like, go to Pizzarama, there's somebody waiting, you need to have a conversation with them. But earlier, when she was trying to pick him up, the voice was telling him to run. So, either something has changed, or there is more than one inner voice, which I don't even want to think about that. Or one of them was not the inner voice that I am reading about here. One of them is an actual inner voice and his gut instinct telling him to run. I don't think that's the case. I think something changed, but it is confusing. And if I were him, I would just not know what to do. I'd want to listen to the voice, but this voice also told me to fucking bail. Last time I ran into the same woman, and she's got a thing under her skin that's snarling. I cannot tell you how much I do not like this situation. It makes me deeply uncomfortable. It makes me so anxious throughout all of this. I'm waiting for her to do something. And so's he. She's bought him a pizza and some root beer, and he doesn't want to eat anything because he's so, worried that she's done something to it, which, you know what? Fair. She sort of laughs and is like, oh, I'm not a witch. I didn't poison you. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be poison. She could technically be telling the truth and still have put something in the food. So, in the long-standing tradition of European folklore, in which if you meet one of the Fae, you do not take a gift and you do not eat what they give you. Just don't. And good job, Jared. I'm so glad that he just leaves after this is over and does not take a bite. I don't know if that would have changed anything, but I just feel better that way. So she tells him a story about a shaman who had two sons. And one of them wanted to be a shaman also, really badly, and wanted to be able to commune with the dead. That's part of what a shaman does. And the other had no interest in that at all, and was in love with a woman who wanted a warrior for a husband. And he is planning on doing that and marrying this woman, while his brother goes off and fasts and drinks special teas in order to draw spirits to him. And of course, the brother who wants to be the shaman so bad does not succeed and winds up starving to death because he won't stop fasting. And the other has spirits visiting him constantly all the time until eventually he gets haunted by the ghost of his own dead brother. And they wind up having this epic battle that results in the brother also being killed by somebody else. So they both wind up dead in the end. It's a pretty bummer story, to be honest. she tells this story, and the relevance of this is so weird. I don't even know that I know really what it is. But he brings up something about, I stopped believing in magic around the same time I stopped believing in Santa. And she says, that fat bastard, God, he's annoying. You know Santa? Never accept any of his dinner invitations. He's a whiny perfectionist with a Jesus complex and a barely closeted glog addiction. Which, you know what? I didn't even look this up. I'm finding out right now as I speak to you all what glog is. Old-fashioned Swedish glog, a spiced, usually alcoholic drink served warm, consumed by messengers and postmen who traveled on horseback or skis in cold weather in Scandinavia. Interesting. Wine, cardamom, cinnamon stick, cloves, orange peel. Oh, so it's like mulled wine. That stuff is banging. So you know what, Santa? Go on with yourself. That's fair. So she asks him, do you see spirits? And he says, no. And she's like, well, okay, you know what? That's good. And then as soon as she realizes that he's not really going to continue to talk over what's going on with him, she just leaves. She's like, all right, well, here's my card. If you want me to help you out, give me a call. Especially if you see a ghost. Extra, give me a call. And she says, I have a large, close family, and they're always getting in trouble. Children to yell at, grandchildren to get out of messes. Goodbye, dear. It was lovely meeting you. He watched her hobble out to her car and slowly lower herself inside. She honked her horn, waving at him, then backed out of her parking space without looking behind her. A blue SUV swerved to avoid her caddy. What in the world? And when she says a close family that I need to keep an eye on, I'm just like, that's definitely supernatural, right? She's not talking about blood relations. She's talking about some other kind of family. She's talking about the family. So at this point, he's thinking to himself, how fucking weird this whole thing was that he got drawn to eat here. And the voice in his head is just like, no, you were just coming to see a friend and she happened to be here. You're tired. You're not really thinking clearly. Let's just go to bed. What do you think, buddy? And he's just like, I guess. And sort of tries to let it go. But it's so many things are happening so much closer together all of a sudden that it gets to a point where ignoring this stuff, as much as he may try, starts to be impossible. What that all meant was bizarre and unsettling. He wanted to forget what had happened. A little fading voice in his head wanted him to forget too, but another part of him watched everything with a cold eye. You played her just right, it said. So how many people are in his head? What is going on here? So he goes home. He is talking to his grandma, his Nana, about when he's coming out there, and she asks him what color scheme he would like for his bedroom. So this bitch is seriously going in on this whole thing. And the next morning when he wakes up, or this is the part where I'm going to read this. No texts from his mother, no phone calls. He hadn't gone upstairs in days. He'd break the news to her after he was on the plane, if she noticed he was gone. He'd been through this with his dad already. Her time apart from him had most likely been filled with new and exciting drug experiences. She hadn't been mad at him. She'd forgotten he existed. Jared didn't think he was that high on her give-a-fuck list anymore. He was running a distant second to whatever she was using. So far back, it was like they weren't even running in the same race. That is a bummer. At the same time, I respect his presence of mind to be able to see what's happening for what it is. The next morning, Jared watched Mr. Jacks wander down the street in his pajamas. He hesitated at the sidewalk, surprised to see the old guy back. He really wanted a quiet day, but Mr. Jacks's pajamas hung off him, and his face was hollow, shadowed. His feet were bare, and the ground was slick with rain. Jared carefully approached. So, what follows here is a really sweet little tableau of him bringing Mr. Jax home, getting him washed up, giving him a shave, rinsing his dentures out, putting him into a fresh diaper, and then clothes. Like, he's performing the work of like a personnel, a caregiver. And he makes breakfast for everybody. It's a weird moment of comfort, even though he's not being taken care of. But there's clearly something about taking care of other people that makes him feel like he's useful and needed. And it's sweet and also just really sad, you know? And he takes Mr. Jax outside to garden so as to simultaneously kind of distract him, but also it calms the guy down. Like, being out here with the plants and everything is obviously making this guy feel calmer and more connected to things, which is something I think that comes with work that's super, super familiar to us. Is there's a certain kind of meditative quality that comes with that. So he changed to the Weather Channel. After a while, her breathing steadied, and then she started snoring. The rain hit the window as the wind picked up. He felt his eyes going heavy, but he fought sleep. He wanted to stay here, in the quiet moment, when everything was calm and everyone was safe. So this starts me feeling emotional, just this scene, right? So then he starts to get texts from his mom, and she is sending him this long fucking diatribe at the same time that Richie is texting him. We're not really that clear on how things have been between him and Richie in this regard in the past, but Richie, like, getting in touch with him in this way and advocating for his mother feels like it's sort of new. Text your mom, Richie texted him, now. Jared shut off the phone. He wanted to stay with Sarah, but watching Mr. and Mrs. Jax slowly dying was brutal. He wanted to believe his mom was sorry, but his dad was always sorry, and he still kept doing crap he had to say sorry for. He didn't want to be a sucker, but he didn't want to be alone. Everything ached, and all the choices felt wrong. Yo, listen, if that isn't the realest shit in the entire world. Owen, my fiance, his parents were not drug addicts, but they were extremely neglectful, literally criminally neglectful. They would have had their children forcibly taken from them if family had not stepped forward and offered to take them. And he wound up living with his grandmother, and she had more money and more resources and was very eager to take him because she knew his situation wasn't good. But she also was afraid to, like, interfere too much. And this situation just constantly reminds me of what he went through. And what's going on with the Jaxes, there were a couple of people that were neighbors when he was a kid, and they sort of provided a second home for him, that they were aware that his parents were not taking care of him. It was not a secret. His parents didn't even try to keep up a front. So, and they went to church. So there was a community around them all the time watching them raising this boy badly. And so these people stepped in a way, in order to give him some refuge and somewhere to go. And those people are still around. But I can only imagine because Owen got taken in by his grandma, I think he was like 9 or 10, I think he moved in. If it had been longer before she took him, and he had relied more and more as he got older on those neighbors, and something had happened to him, I feel like that would have been something that would, like, haunt him forever. Because, he gets very attached to people now. Like, that's part of his deal, is this desire to create a sense of family somehow in his life, because his own family doesn't quite, like, his parents specifically don't quite feel like family. And you could totally see that happening here with Jared. And it's just so, it's so sweet, that he wants that, and that he is he has enough self-awareness to realize that he wants that and reach for it, rather than closing himself off due to constant unending disappointment in his life, which is certainly a valid, like, it's I don't think healthy, but the fact that a lot of people would handle it that way is deeply, deeply understandable. And I just really find this whole section of the book to be so, like, emotionally brutal. So here we get this really strange back and forth between the texts from his mother and the texts from Richie. So she starts off with, "My mother used to clean like this. I sobered up and thought she was here. I was possessed by mom. So weird." Meanwhile, Richie's saying, "My brother's a tweaker. He shot me for my money. Shithead came to me in the hospital and stole my sneakers, wallet, juice box, wearing my sneakers, telling me I'm paranoid. Fucking hated him so hard. You think your mom's bad? She's not." Meanwhile, his mom is saying, "My mom went to St. Mike's residential school until she got TB. They sent her to a sanatorium. None of the native kids there got penicillin, just the staff. They put her in a body cast and starved her. Rows of kids coughing and choking in a dorm. Each morning they wheeled her into a room in the basement and shone a purple light on her chest. Kids disappeared. She's only alive because they lost funding and had to shut down. She married Dad because he wanted a punching bag. He left because she stepped out on him, but I don't blame her." So, first of all, can we talk about her fucking mom and what the fuck happened there? The deal with Native people and their forced assimilation and the way that they were experimented on and treated in the school system, and I use school system in the loosest fucking terms, major quotes around school system, by the way, is one of the most horrifying open secrets of North America in general. You know, because we're in British Columbia for this, but this is absolutely true in the United States as well. And it is constantly shocking to me that people don't know this stuff. But then I realize, like, why would they? I know this stuff because I went and found out about it on my own. Nobody's taught any of this. We don't learn about this stuff, which is a shame because it's so fucking important. And this, and people not knowing about this kind of thing is what leads to, like, idiotic shit like J.K. Rowling writing about how Native magicians in the United States went to a boarding school founded by Europeans in the United States. Like, boarding schools were bad news to Indigenous people. That would not be something that they would be volunteering to do. And it just shows such a lack of context and understanding. And what her mother went through, it sounds like they didn't give her penicillin and used this purple light on her chest to see. It's like this was an experimental treatment to see if that would work. As far as starving her, maybe that was just incidental. Maybe they didn't, like, feel the need to feed somebody that they thought was about to die anyway. It was a waste of resources. Maybe it's unrelated. But nevertheless, this story being so close to him, this was his grandmother. This isn't somebody in his distant past that he's hearing stories from. This was some shit that happened one generation removed. Like, y'all, we try and act like shit is so far in the rearview mirror, and it is not. There are still people alive who went through this shit. Oh, I get so mad. Mom went full God happy, praying and kneeling and virtue and cleaning. My sis left the second she turned 16. Me and Mom alone. Nothing ever good enough. Nothing ever right. She decided I was a whore and nothing was going to change her mind. Never wanted to do that to you, Jelly Bean. Never wanted to make you feel you had to run from me. So apparently this is the first time Jared has heard that he had an aunt and that his mom had a sister. He had no idea. So he texts Grandma and says, Mom had a sister? And she replies, here's a link to an article, R.E. your aunt, Mavis Moody. Be forewarned, she's a writer. She published an essay in a magazine about searching the downtown east side of Vancouver for your mother. Words were spoken. I wondered if you knew about her. She's one of your mother's triggers, so I hesitate to bring her up. I am super curious about that, and he does not click on this and read the article right here, and I'm dying to know what happened. Dying. Oh my God, Jared, how did you not immediately read this? Meanwhile, Richie is freaking the fuck out and is just like, why don't you fucking reply? I can tell from the check marks that you have seen this. Which is interesting. Turn off your read receipts, Jared. Okay, buddy? That's just some basic shit. If you want to be ducking people, that's what you do. So he finally does go home and talks to her. And she's trying to make a joke. The way that she handles everything, right? She tries to make it lighthearted, like it wasn't really that big of a deal. And says that this drug turned her into her mom, and because of that, she will never touch the stuff again. Nothing but good old-fashioned booze and coke for this broad. And she is in bed, shaking, sweating, vomiting profusely, and barely able to stand. They can't even get her to the bathroom. She has a bucket by the bed to piss in because she can't make it all the way to the bathroom. So I just, I don't want Jared to just abandon his mom. Not really. However, I kind of want him to abandon his mom. I'm in the same place as he is with a lot of this, just feeling she's family, yes, but I also I shouldn't feel responsible for her. Sure. But also it's not just about owing her something. It's about what can you live with? And I don't feel like Jared can walk away from his mom and go on living his life normally and not be eaten up by that forever. I don't see him being that type. I think that would ruin a part of his life. He'd just be so consumed by guilt. Even though it's not really just or fair, I think that's how it would be for him. I feel bad for the kid. I know I keep saying that, but I really do. So he goes over to the Jaxes the next morning. Sarah calls him and tells him that the uncles are coming. And I didn't know what this meant, but what it is that they are bringing a moose to be butchered. They already have it skinned, and they're bringing it into the house, and they have to butcher it into pieces, and then everybody takes some of it home. So it's a really kind of touching scene of him getting to know Sarah's family a little bit deeper. And Sarah is a little freaked out about the idea of butchering this animal and is just not really sure that she can do it. Meanwhile, Mrs. Jax, he walks over there. Let's see. The neighborhood was silent. Rumor had it he was not signing his divorce. Oh, that's right. There's somebody in the neighborhood, but there's who's at the end of the street who's always playing Slayer nonstop in his garage. Rumor had it he was not signing his divorce papers and the 30 days were almost up. Everyone wanted someone else to go have a talk with him, make sure he wasn't planning on taking a car nap with the engine running, but no one really wanted to get involved. He had a lot of guns. So he is helping with all of this stuff, and they're making sure that Mrs. Jax is taking her medication, and this dude comes in. Doug, who looks like Elvis. So weird. I love this whole idea. And then there are two women at the truck, and there's another guy, though, and I'm trying to track their names down. Or maybe there's just the one. No, I thought there was more than one. Well, he makes a good impression on them. Later on, she tells him, they like the way you handle your knife. He's a keeper, they said. He knows his way around a moose carcass. They said that, huh? I'm paraphrasing. So she decides that she's going to do some shrooms. She asks him if he would like to partake, and he's basically like, no, you know what? I don't think that's a good idea. I have definitely been having a little bit too much sober tripping in my life recently, and I think that I need to back the fuck away. So you go ahead and have fun, and I will just hang out with you. And she's like, no, you really need to do this with me. I want you to see what I'm seeing. And he's just like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm here, and just try and relax. She drops the news at this point, as she's getting high, that the uncles want us to come live with them. Jared swallowed. Yeah? Would you visit us? Sure. Mom's not going to let me go, Sarah said. She hates the res. I don't think she gets a vote. You've got fireflies around you, Sarah said. No, I don't. Whoa, they're big. Lots of them. A swarm. They're in a pattern. They're flying together. So at this point, she is assigning these to him. But later on, he talks about how they follow her around, because eventually he starts to see them. And I'm curious which of these is true, if they originated with him or with her. They're time and space. They're traveling through time. They're going to bring us to the door. They're singing. I want to hear what they're singing. Mobius, she said. The fireflies say the fractal patterns are the clue. There is no end. Time eats itself. Who's Mobius? The shape of the snake. Okay. You should see this, she said. No, thanks. I have nasty trips, Jared said, and I have enough shit in my life. I want you here with me. I'm right here. I want you to see what I see. She pressed her palm to his forehead. Sarah? Jared took her hand off and held it away from his head. She yanked back, but he held on. One of her cuts had opened up and dripped blood on his face. Cool it, okay? You're getting intense again. Chill. Give me the knife. Not while you're wasted. No cutting. No cutting, Sarah agreed. So she traces his face with her fingertip because he's got blood on him, and she says, blood, you're mine, now and forever. Is this anything? Because I feel worried that he has just gotten ensnared in something with a blood pact that he is not completely aware of. See what I see, Sarah said. She covered his eyes with her hands, and he was about to say something, about to make a smart-ass comment. But she took her hands away, and the ceiling was gone. The sky above them was splattered with stars as bright as light bulbs, and in the high center a swarm of fireflies flew in a figure 8. They buzzed, but not like bees, repeating a word Jared didn't know. The land beneath, the land they were lying on, was not his basement, but a wasteland with boulders and hard-packed mud, cracked dry. Dust swirled in small tornadoes of hot wind. The darkness was lit by the stars and the fireflies. Holy crap, Jared said. Something flickered in the corner of his eyes. He turned his head. A dark figure ducked behind one of the boulders. So, here is where we get the first ape man. This was the part that I first read out loud to Owen, because the description of this guy is unnerving in the extreme. He heard something clack like dice and turned to see a man squatting behind them. A naked man with his head cocked at a weird angle. He studied them, his forehead deeply sloped, skin smooth and stretched over his bony body, mouth falling open, teeth sharpened to points. He drooled. His necklace of finger bones clacked as he moved. The man crept along the ground like an ape, bony knuckles supporting his wide-chested body. He hissed. The fireflies sank until the swarm was above their heads, a hum like an amplifier, waiting for the electric guitar to kick in. Sarah sat and then stood, lifting her arms. Blood streamed down her skin. The man darted forward and licked it. The firefly swarm sank lower. Shadows moved in the distance, more men like the man crouching below, more hissing. The man circled, trying to approach Jared from behind. When the fireflies touched Sarah's hand, she started to shred, her hand going wispy like she was made of smoke. "No!" Jared shouted. The men with pointed teeth galloped up towards them, grunting. Sarah drifted upwards into the swarm. Jared willed himself awake, willed Sarah awake, wanted them home. Now. And then the chapter ends, and we move right on over to Jared hanging out with his mom and thinking about how she doesn't look good. Excuse me? How does that end there? Do you see my eye twitching in rage? How the fuck do you end that there? What? What happened? Oh my God, I'm dying. I hate this. Meanwhile, he is trying to act like everything is totally normal, but he's still seeing this fucking dude who climbs up through the floor along with a bunch of other ones of these guys. And they wander around sniffing things, and at one point they try to touch him, but they go right through him. There is a lot happening here. And they're solid enough to him that they're able to, like, block his view of the television. So it's not like they're, like, ghostly figures. They look solid. They just can't touch him. Then he hears something outside. He got to the window in time to see a raccoon or a cat, something dark, small, and quick, skittering into the bushes. The ape men went silent. They drew close together and climbed carefully back through the floor. When your scary hallucinations are scared, Jared thought, that's not a good sign at all. Jared, someone whispered, your mom's hurt. She's hurt, the voice said again. So, this is the first time that he sees Baby. I cannot tell you how much this creeped me out. And I knew that this was going to happen again. Like, because Baby keeps on sort of circling the house until daylight and then goes away. And there are mismatched paw prints around the house. So I'm like, of course, there's something out here shape-shifting. It occurred to me for a second that maybe Baby was a ghost and that he was seeing, like, spirits of the dead, just not the kind that we would think, not people. But it was to the alignment of when this starts to begin and when those, like, ape men are behaving really frightened. I just didn't think that they would be scared of a ghost. I felt like this had to be something else. Especially because of how it stayed outside the house. If it was a ghost, I felt like it could come up to him. But it seemed to be held at bay somehow. And I would imagine that's like a threshold thing. Maybe something else, but it's clear it's trying to lure him outside, which is exactly what it does later. So he goes and, like, the next morning asks his mom if she heard this, and she says that she did not, but she had also taken an Ambien to fall asleep. And she notices that he's packing and instructs him on how to better carry it and how to get away with having it with him in school and not get caught and all of this stuff, which on the one hand, I hated this whole concept earlier, but now that this shit is starting to happen, I was just like, yeah, no, this feels like the right time to start worrying about this shit, actually. So then we get chapter 31, The Universe is a Lonely Hunter. Did you ever pour a little Elmer's glue onto your hand, spread it around, wait for it to dry, and then peel it off? Once it dries, the glue holds a clear imprint of the lines of your palms. Imagine our universe as the dried glue. All the beings on earth and in the sky, all the endless blackness of space, all the heavens in their great spinning chaos, everything we know exists in this thin copy of a completely different layer of reality. Our universe is a membrane, a hologram, a soap bubble. We don't go through the looking glass. We are the looking glass. Some cultures imagine our world is on the back of a turtle, which you would think is not literal. But our universe rides a creature so strange we don't have the senses to detect it or the math to explain it. Maybe we do live in a layer of mud on the back of a giant multidimensional turtle. Consider the dark star. Ooh, I almost dropped my phone. At the center of our galaxy. Our Kali, our Odin-eating wolf at the end of days, this massive black hole, shapes our galaxy into a maypole of stars pinwheeling around its gravity well. As we approach the cosmic Charybdis, consider the violence necessary to shred the matter of suns into its swirling accretion disk, where the broken stars scream radiation before they're funneled into the heart of the black hole. This gravitational meat grinder forces space and time into a grisly singularity. This is a door not only in time, but in dimensions. Consider roadkill. Consider the bloody pancake of a body now a shadow on a road. Your three-dimensional body made two-dimensional by the mass and velocity of cars. Now consider your three-dimensional body in 9 dimensions. Imagine pouring a glass of apple juice into the ocean. When you shift out of our dimensions, you run the risk of dispersion so profound, even the memory of you is obliterated. Universes are stubbornly separate. Unless you are a trickster. That's a lot. That is a lot to absorb. It's an interesting idea trying to compare like the concentration of molecules of our beings to the number of dimensions in the universe. I can't even begin to like quite wrap my head around that, but I'm trying. I'm making an effort. Let it be known. I don't claim to be good at this. So we cut from that back into like a moment of real ordinariness where he is at lunch with Dylan, and Dylan has quit hockey and is talking about how bummed his parents are about it. And Jared just doesn't really care. And he feels it's very clear Dylan quit hockey because his ex is dating one of the players and he's jealous and can't handle being around that. But he's trying to act like it's just like, well, I just didn't want to play anymore. I don't know. So there's this whole thing going on between like the two of them like kind of hassling each other, and Dylan talking about how weird Sarah is, and Jared just being like, I don't really understand why I'm supposed to give a shit what anybody thinks of Sarah. And I really don't understand why you give such a shit about what people out there say. It's just such a non-factor to me. And why are you always so wrapped up in that? And they are talking about this when Ebony and Bam Bam, who's the new guy she's seeing, walk by. And at this point, Dylan's like, you know what, I should go, and just takes off. When he got back from school, his room smelled like burnt sweetgrass and cedar. Little red packets hung in the corners with fresh boughs of cedar. Jared hadn't seen that since he was a kid. His dad had laughed at his mom for hanging them up, but that hadn't stopped her. So what is this? Did she like cleanse his room? Because that's what it feels like. You know, growing up, my mom used cedar incense in order to cleanse the house, and as she would use sage sometimes as well, but really the cedar incense was the one. And I actually have some in my kitchen right now because that shit smells amazing. But yeah, I'm just really, really curious over what this is meant to be, and if this is like going to protect him at all. If she's like aware what's happening with him, I don't know. So he gets a text from his grandma as he's looking around this room and like thinking about how long it's been since she's done something like this. And honestly, having, I think, probably an emotional reaction to this, he suddenly gets a text from Nana, and it's a picture of his room. And this is a real bad time because it looks awesome, but Jared is like feeling really guilty. The picture showed a blue and brown bedroom with patio doors that opened to a deck overlooking a rocky beach and a sunlit ocean. Are you kidding me? And he's like thinking to himself, oh, damn it, I don't want to go now. But he wanted to believe his mom would stay back from the hard drugs, even though his dad hadn't. He knew this didn't mean the drama was over. He wasn't a complete idiot. He felt slimy for going behind his mom's back, but maybe if he waited until she was more stable to tell her, she wouldn't freak out. Or maybe she'd fall off the wagon and everything would be moot. Yeah, I'm like low-key wanting her to just go off again so that he can just get to his Nana's and start fresh. This in-between shit, I can't handle it. And he has a conversation with his mom a little bit later, and I won't get too into this because I'm running out of time here. But he mentions David, and she says something that makes it pretty clear to him that she got beat down or abused in some fashion by him and just sort of took it. He wanted a little woman, she said. I thought he just wanted to be daddy. She looked far away, lost in thought, and Jared knew then that David had spread his mean around, and she'd put up with it until that night. So that's one of those things that I always get frustrated with when people act like abusers only abuse like one person. It's rarely true, and if it is, it's oftentimes somebody who's taking the abuse thinking that they're saving everyone else, and they're not, because even if another person doesn't get beat, they're still probably aware that there's something going on and living in fear of a person, and that's no good either. But it also doesn't feel like his mom had a lot of options, so I don't know. So here's when Jared walks past the Jaxes and sees the for sale sign in the front yard. Guys, we told you we're moving in with the uncles, but not forever. The news is not good, Mrs. Jax said. I want my husband taken care of. And then Jared was crying. It was sudden, and he couldn't stop it, and the ache of everything, the sadness of it, the unfairness of it. Jared joined back in, and they leaned their foreheads against each other and bawled. Yeah, this is rough. This was when I started crying. So there are fireflies around Sarah still, and they start speaking French. What? The ape men howled at the fireflies. Jared knew how they felt, though he was momentarily shocked that his hallucination spoke French and seemed to be conjugating verbs. Sarah was waiting for him to say something. And meanwhile, these fireflies are saying, the shadow suggests the object. Your existence suggests birth and inevitably death, whereas the shadow of infinity suggests the divine, or God, to use your crude terminology. In the way a poem could not be made of words, reducing the universe to a single formula, however complex, highlights the limits of human reliance on the tangible. Transcendence requires more than simple mathematical manipulation. You are words. Your soul is the poem. The struggle to make mortal words say the infinite unsayable is the struggle that defines sentience. Oh, man. And he's thinking to himself how incredibly bored he is by all of this. Which, you know what? Fair. There's a point with stuff like this when you get too metaphysical that it really comes down to, at least for me, what's the point? Why do I need to know this? Why do I need to think about this? Does this affect my everyday life at all? No. And I get uber practical about it. Sometimes I like to think about this stuff, but oftentimes not. And he has a moment with Mrs. Jax where he thanks her for helping him that one time that he like left his body. And she says that, I'm glad you came to me when you were lost. I would have been lost without you. I hope they keep the garden. Peter loves the garden. Oh, you guys. Gah. I hate it. I hate it. So Jared has a moment where he tells Sarah he loves her, and she can't say it back. And she's obviously like a little freaked out. And he storms out of there, and he feels obviously pretty bad about this. Like, it'd be easy to sort of shrug it off and act like, well, whatever, you don't have to say it back. I'm not totally heartbroken, but he's not doing that. He's really like, you don't have to say it back, but this bums me out. So he gets home, and there's baby. And he gets really caught up after all of the loss that he has suffered this day, finding out that Mrs. Jax is going to be leaving, that Sarah is going to be leaving. He gets really caught up in the fact that baby's back and doesn't really like think through what this means. And this thing succeeds in luring him out to the woods. He starts to realize by then that this is not baby. But it's kind of too late. Like, he almost has walked into the woods by now. And he's standing there calling because baby's in the woods somewhere making sounds like she's hurt. But he's like, this doesn't feel right, though. And as he's standing there, Sarah walks out of the woods. Say what? Except it's not Sarah. And he can tell, again, that it's not Sarah. And finally he says, what you're doing isn't funny. It's mean and it's hateful. And as he's saying this, the fake Sarah facing him, stops smiling. And he can hear kids in the woods giggling and like scampering towards them in the dark. This is the part that I read out loud. I swear to God, guys, I was like so creeped out by this. I hate it. Oh, God. So Sarah begins to transform and is saying, you loved your dog because you were her master. You only love the ones that crawl to you and beg for food. We're dying because you're killing us. You're killing the world. And you have the nerve to wonder why we hate you? And she transforms until she is a river otter. And then a bunch of other river otters come out of the woods. And Sarah Otter, which is what I will call it for now, says, you need to be stopped. And he pulls his gun. And as he does, the voice in his head says, I'll be there as soon as I can. Just don't go running into the woods, okay? You might want to stay away from rivers, too. And the ocean. Just stay home and game. Don't even go to school. And he manages to get home. And as he does, the otters are banging on the window. So it's clear like they can't get into the house. But the ape men can, and they're like huddled in the corner. And it's really weird. I don't know what they're doing here. And he texts his Nana, what do you know about river otters? And immediately she texts back, I'm coming. So she fucking knows something about what the hell is going on here. And I guess, I've been theorizing about this voice being like a second person in his head, but it just said, I'm coming. So I guess it is legit an outside person. But I can't help but think there's more than one voice in his head. I don't know. That was a really good scene, though. That freaked me the fuck out. I could see it in my head so clearly. Some writers can do that, man. She's really good. Whew. That's some shit. That is some shit. So yeah, man, thank you to Robin again for commissioning this. I am really enjoying this. And I hope that you guys are enjoying it too. And somebody is actually commissioning a block of time for me to talk about books that I like and what people should be reading and who I recommend certain things to. And I think this is going to be on my list of things that I recommend to people because it's just so unusual and, it's just really good. So, all right, I have to go. I have another recording shortly, but thank you all so, so much for listening. Thank you to Robin for commissioning this again. And I will be seeing you all again soon with a new episode. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.